Hi everyone. For my visual metaphor for the paradigm of learning, I chose the image of a community garden. Now, this image to me feels very serene. It feels very collaborative. But when I think about learning, I think about it in many different pieces that I felt that this image especially exhibits. So, um, after all of my years in middle school, I really feel that I am definitely a very strong proponent of the constructivist lens. So, when we think about the idea of being a constructivist, we know in an environment like that that there's lots of scaffolding that's going on. If we see that the students in the picture of the community garden, you see that there's lots of different jobs that are being created to create one big picture that benefits the whole entire collaborative piece. So in this case, everybody has a job in order to make learning flourish more and to make it more successful for everybody to benefit from. There takes some coaching and some facilitating, some guiding that goes with that, which is also another characteristic, I would say, of a constructivist lens. And if you think about what a constructivist actually does in class, you think about how they encourage metacognition. So if you think about the image of a community garden and you think about each of the students involved in constructing this community garden, they have to think about not only the role that they play within this garden, they have to think about how everybody else's role impacts how this garden is going to flourish. They also have to think about the specific skill set that it takes to become an expert in that specific area of that garden in order to create what we might call or might consider the big picture. In addition to metacognition, there's this idea of self-analysis, taking a hold of that role, owning that role, knowing that they have a purpose in what they are doing, moving forward in reflection. In terms of a community garden, is my role being completed? Do I have to weed? Do I have to water? Do I have to fertilize? And learning the same way, if we think about growth mindsets, kind of leaning on Carol Dweck's work of, what can I do to make myself better? What am I missing? How can mistakes help me improve? And then there's also this idea of awareness. Not only is there self-awareness in this process because of the purpose and the roles that have been distinguished by the facilitators, but there's also this idea that everybody leans on each other in order to create this vision that was set forth purposely in the first place. So I wanted to connect this to my learning ideas because as a teacher, like I said before, I feel like I've evolved quite a bit in the way I think about learning. And I'd like to say that evolution will definitely needs to keep evolving, but the position that I'm in right now and the way that the changes that I've made with my current 8th grade English classes is that we've really taken a look at how we can work together in order to solve bigger problems. So I'm gonna use the idea of inquiry in a specific study that I just finished with students in the fall. We read a book called Paper Things. That really basically it talked about teen homelessness and the idea of homelessness and not the traditional sense of homelessness, but the unseen homelessness we might find in schools, such as couch surfing and the unknown population that you tend to overlook or seep down into the cracks because they just go so unnoticed. So my students did a 3-week book study that you would traditionally find in an English class. This is where we go over, reading standards and literature skills, just to make sure that the overall comprehension of the book works. In partnership with that, however, I brought in different people that represent the different characters or the different facets of the book so that kids could interview them to get a real world voice inside their experience while they were reading this text. Also in partnership with that, other groups were blogging about this experience in terms of what they were reading in the book and how they wanted to explore characters and settings and plots. And then a third group went in to create a podcast about a nonfiction article connected to some of the more main ideas of the text. So as I set this kind of stage of 3 weeks of reading this book, but also partner this with the blogging, the podcasting, and the interviews, you start to see this cultivation of everybody having a role, everybody having a job to create this big picture. Because if you were an interviewer that week, you were responsible for not only conducting the interview, but recording the interview, uploading it to our class wiki page so that all of us could benefit from the fruits of your labor in terms of gathering what I like to call with students data. And so then other students also corresponded and interacted with blogging comments, and then they also were able to listen to the podcast that their peers created, creating this bigger idea of absorbing the text in different perspectives, creating different perspectives. So from there, we entered into an inquiry process where kids were able to ask a bunch of questions related to the idea of homelessness. I currently work for a rural district that this is a topic that's often not seen, not heard, not necessarily spoken to because it's not really on the radar of our community necessarily. But it's not to say that it doesn't exist. So with that being said, the kids had a lot of questions related to this topic. And to interject my thinking about this topic, I would much rather have the safety and the comfort of talking about and breaking down stereotypes in a classroom rather than having students cultivate more stereotypes and repeating more of the same jargon that tends to surround something like homelessness out in other voices. I would much rather have that broken down and having discussions and having those, what I like to call wobble moments, where you get to change your mind a little bit. Excuse me. So as we went through questions, and then we were able to do some research. So then my kids were able to participate in what I like to call like a media campaign. They were able to create a campaign to kind of give back this information and process it so that it would benefit our school community. So in order to create this campaign, I myself being a facilitator in some of these ideas, but it was the kids that had to create the garden. They were the constructivists behind this. They each had a piece of this in order to make its success happen, in order to spread the message and awareness that homelessness can exist anywhere. So we had a lot of really great campaigns come out of this. Anything from, we had several posters and infographics, what I like to consider print media. We've had several social media outlets established as representation of their campaign, and kids formulated these different social media facets and they managed them. We've also had kids build websites who had never even attempted to think that they could build websites before, build websites in support of their campaign. I even have several murals that were designed, so artistically expressing the message of what they had learned in their research and how the community can learn about that. So I know that constructivists may not be for everybody, and it may not also be for every classroom. But I would say after all of my years of teaching, this is something that I definitely believe in. I believe in having opportunities for kids to be learners, but also to be teachers, to be self-aware, to advocate for themselves, to work on things that mean something to them, to take action. Not to be afraid to talk about difficult topics or barriers or how to overcome those barriers and how do we create something that we can all benefit from. So the best image that I could possibly think of in this case is this community garden. So constructivism and community gardens, I believe, grow hand in hand.